All right, everybody, welcome to today's live video. My name is Bethany Dotson, relationship coach and yoga therapist for professional high-achieving women who are seeking to break their cycle of unhealthy relationships, whether they've dated emotionally unavailable partners or even emotionally abusive partners. And today I'm going to be talking with you about the importance of boundary setting and communicating what you need. And the title of today's live stream is Do You Say Yes When You Mean No? And I have a special guest with me today, my colleague, my friend, my fellow coach, Jeremy Hamburg. He is a dating coach and mentor for autistic young adults. And he helps them learn social skills and helps them begin the dating process. And in a former lifetime, go ahead. Do you want to add to that?
No, it's just great to be here. No, keep going.
Yeah. So Jeremy was also a former prosecutor in the Bronx, and he handled a lot of criminal cases, including domestic abuse and domestic violence. So I'm excited to have him here to offer feedback and to offer some value to you from a male perspective on the other side of the equation on how important this is when you're trying to make healthier choices in your dating and your love life. So anything you want to add before we jump in, Jeremy?
No, let's jump in. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk to you and your folks, and I'm trying to get the camera angle right.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
No worries.
There we go.
So this video is for you really if you struggle with boundaries and if you've been in, if you find yourself a really nice person, meaning you feel a lot for other people, and you have a pattern of settling in relationships where on the inside it's not right for you, but you can't help yourself and you move forward anyway. This is for you if you have a pattern of chronically ignoring the red flags, hoping that somebody's going to change, falling for potential instead of seeing the reality. This video is for you. And this may apply to you if you resonate with being a people pleaser. So I want to talk about why, and this is something that I hear time and time again, and Jeremy, you may have some insight on this, but whenever I speak to someone and they have had a history of unhealthy relationships, one of the common things that I hear is that, well, I've learned my lesson. I know that I will do better next time. And I want to talk to you about why logically telling yourself that you'll do better next time usually fails. Do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I'm a firm believer that the only day that's guaranteed is today. Tomorrow is a mirage. Tomorrow is a promise that may never be fulfilled. The universe and God don't owe us tomorrow. And so the only day that we really get to control is what happens today. And so, if we make a promise to ourselves about what we're going to do sometime in the future, there's no guarantee that we ever get there. The only guarantee of what the future is going to hold for us are the choices that we make right now and the choices that we make today. And so I put no stock in future intention. I only put stock into what we promise we will do for ourselves right now in the moment.
Yeah, that's excellent point. And I find a lot of times when I speak with women, it's more that they're buying into a fantasy in the future rather than choosing to make the difficult but right choice here and now, like right now. There is, what I find to be true is that most women will avoid as long as possible. And I say that I've talked about this a lot in my previous videos, but a lot of women will avoid, and we do this as human beings, we avoid discomfort as much as we can, and oftentimes in very sneaky, subtle, subconscious ways. And I totally agree that there is no future. We only have right now, and that's definitely you know, something I think that we all take for granted. But especially if you're watching this and you've been guilty of telling yourself, I'll do better next time. I'm going to learn my lesson next time. But your past has indicated that you never learn your lesson and that you keep repeating that pattern. It's important to realize that there really is no guarantee. And not to be super morbid, but there is no guarantee for tomorrow. And I think that a lot of women and even, human beings in general kind of buy into this hope of someday or one day I will. And that can be quite an addictive um, detour, like thinking that one day I'll be better, one day I'll attract someone who's healthy when you can start that process right now. And I think most people avoid doing the work that it takes to start that process right now or make healthier choices right now because it requires a degree of discomfort. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. All of us want to think that down the line our life is going to be better or in some ways different than
Mm-hmm.
it is right now. And it absolutely can be, but when you think about it logically, if any aspect of your life is going to be different in the future, it's because you made a different choice about your life now, right? Any change that's going to happen in your life at any point is the result of you making different choices than the choices that you're making now or the choices that you're making in the past. So if you want to live a better life someday, that someday is never going to come unless you make the decision today that what you're going to do is different than what you've um, been doing in the past. Um, someday really doesn't come unless you make conscious choices to change the path that you're on. And we can all speak personally about that. We all want better lives. We all want better houses, better cars, better relationships. And even for the longest time, I remained stuck in what I was doing. And I knew that if I wanted to live a healthier lifestyle and a happier lifestyle and a more relaxed lifestyle, that I needed to get out of the rat race that I was living in. And I put it off and I put it off and I put it off, and I said, someday I'll lose weight, and someday I'll get more exercise, and someday I'll get more sun. And then one day I just like, it was just like, hey, it's not going to happen unless I consciously make the choice today um, to do that. And so I come to you today from sunny Southern California instead of rainy New York City, because I had to take a stand for myself and realize that someday was never coming unless I really took a stand that day. And the same is true for our relationships.
Yeah.
Someday never comes unless we take a stand for ourselves today. And if we don't take a stand for ourselves today, tomorrow is going to be the exact same, and the day after is going to be the exact same, and the day
Yeah.
after.
Yeah. And I want to add to that it's never, in my experience, and especially with, working with women who have past trauma and dysfunctional relationships, it's never about just making that one decision today. It's about making that decision again and again and again and again and again and reinforcing that decision. And, what I found is that when women have, prior trauma, and most people, kind of minimize emotional abuse. They minimize, oh, my partner was controlling, my partner was manipulative, but he wasn't really abusive. He never hit me. And so that's a really common thing that I hear quite often. But the psychological ramifications of being manipulated, of um, being made to feel like you're going crazy, basically, can do a number on your brain, and specifically the parts of your brain that are responsible for making healthy decisions and for speaking up about what you need in the moment where there's like heightened emotion, in the moment of conflict, in the moment where you have to make a decision. Am I going to see this red flag and choose something differently? Or am I going to see this red flag and minimize it and ignore it, just like the thousands of times I've done in the past over my lifetime? So I feel for sure making the committed, conscious decision to change that pattern once and for all in your life is vital. I also believe that it requires choosing that path again and again and again. And this is where I find most people fail. Just like New Year's resolutions, I'm going to lose 45 pounds. And then by January 31st, they fall off the wagon and they're like, they're eating and they're back into their old ways. And I think this is why, in my experience, it's particularly challenging to make a lasting change. And what I've also realized, sadly, is that women who have this pattern of attracting emotionally unavailable or even abusive partners, they on some level like that dynamic. And that's either due to their own rejection fears, their own abandonment fears, their previous trauma, that they don't like it in the moment where they're clinging and they're trauma bonded to an unhealthy partner. But at the same time, they're getting some kind of a payoff. And that cycle is very, very, very addictive. But I think that whole thing, that whole pattern really skews one's perception on her ability to make a firm decision. Okay, I'm going to do something differently, but then to continue to reinforce that decision again and again and again, especially when she is, in a dating situation with somebody and she's not sure she can trust her judgment. And all of a sudden the guy says that all of his exes were crazy. Well, wait, is that a red flag? I'm not sure. Blah, blah, blah. And then clouding her own judgment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. The older that I get, and now that I have kids, I think I view life a little bit differently. And now that I got, some gray hairs on either side. And one of the things that I think about all the time is that each day that passes is one day less that I have on this planet. And, how do I want to spend my time on this planet? What do I want to feel every single day? And, one of the reasons why I made the choice to come from New York over to California is because, I love the sunshine and I want every day to be filled with sun. And that's real, but it's also a metaphor for life, right? Every day can be a beautiful day. Every day can be relaxing. Every day can be pleasurable. You can have a connection with your partner or your spouse every single day, but only if you set it up that way.
Right.
And so, I totally understand the cycle that happens in abusive relationships. I totally get that there's a payoff, almost like a gambler's payoff.
Mhm.
But I think there's also value in remembering that life can be easy and life can be pleasurable and life does not need to be cyclical. It could be just like a high level of good, a high level of awesomeness, if you allow yourself to step away from that cycle of boom and bust, and abuse and love,
Yeah.
and allow yourself to imagine that there is a different way of experiencing life that's more even and more pleasurable and just less stressful.
Yeah. I love that. And I think the key word that I heard you say over and over again was allowing. And I think that's something that most women who've been in this situation struggle with, because in this dynamic, there's often a lot of codependency, ignoring a red flag, trying to get her partner to change is really underneath about control, trying to control an outcome, trying to prevent the inevitable, trying to prevent pain, trying to make things a certain way, even though they are not a certain way. And, what I find, a lot of women, they exit these types of relationships. They are often still in a heightened state of fight or flight. They feel a super control gives them security because there's this fear of the unknown. And many women that I talk to, they don't believe that choosing to show up in your day, no matter what's going on, in a relaxed place, choosing pleasure, choosing connection, choosing happiness, choosing to live in this heightened state, this heightened emotional state, they don't believe that's possible. Number one, they don't believe a healthy partnership is possible for them down the line. And then number two, their brains have been so skewed by past trauma that it's hard for them to, it's almost, this is a point that I was going to make just a second ago. It's like they actually are choosing to stay where they are, giving up the old identity of I've always had trouble in relationships is actually quite challenging and scary, even for a lot of women that I talk to, even women that I work with currently, because that means that they have to be in the unknown. They have to be in a state of allowing. And for many women that I talk to and I work with, that's very, very scary. That's very terrifying. What do you have to say about that process?
No, I mean, I think you're totally right. And I had something I was going to say and sort of lost my train of thought. But we come to expect that what happened in our past is what's going to be our future, and that's our normal, right? And we're even seeing that in COVID times.
Yeah.
Uh, we're just coming to expect that the the inconveniences and the pain in our COVID time is going to be what the future holds, and this stuff has become the new norm. And so, when this pattern of abuse and this cycle of ignoring red flags and this fight or flight is what your norm is, it actually in some respect becomes your comfort zone, and anything that
Yeah.
is different from your norm is uncomfortable, even if it's potentially a million times better. But if we believe that we're capable of growth, and we want to adopt a mindset of growth and a mindset of abundance, we have to recognize that that feeling of discomfort, that we don't know what's on the other side, but we have faith that it's going to be better than our now, right? That's where the growth happens. If you're not feeling that level of discomfort, that you're doing something new, then you're not doing anything new, and you're
Yeah.
and you're relegating your future to being the same as your past. So
Yeah.
a certain element of discomfort and a certain element of what's on the other side with a different choice, it should be a good feeling, because
Yeah.
that's how you know you're growing.
Yeah, and this is something that we really work on with clients that come into the work, is helping them face that discomfort with a wide open heart, helping them move through that discomfort, helping them stay present to that discomfort, because quite honestly, we help people get really comfortable with being uncomfortable, and ironically, learning to make healthy choices in relationship is really uncomfortable for my clients, because it flies in the face of everything that they've been experiencing and feeling and believing, often for their entire life. And they have so many limiting negative stories about making those healthy choices, and which that's why they're so conflicted and why they're repeating the pattern over and over again. So I help them bridge that gap. But the process, often in the beginning, is learning how to be fully emotionally present with discomfort and not run from it, because in many ways, they've been running from discomfort every time they ignore a red flag or minimize abusive behavior. So one of the core elements that we really work on is helping our clients stay fully present so that they can ride that wave of discomfort, be comfortable in the unknown, and all of that translates to learning how to be comfortable in the moment during a point of conflict, which is usually when people start to wobble and start to default into their old behavior. But because we've helped them gain so much emotional regulation and control, in a good sense, over their own feelings and their responses, they're able to um, apply that in the moment in real life situations.
Yeah. Sorry, there's some really loud birds. Just can you hear the birds in my? Yeah, that's what happens when your home backs up to a greenway. And they tend to start at like 5 in the morning. Yeah, what you're sort of describing is really the fact that in some respects relationships are a choice between what sort of discomfort you want to experience. Right?
Mhm.
Life is always going to be in some ways easiest by yourself because there's no negotiation, there's no other person that you're trying to mesh into your life, but it's lonely that way. So we as human beings are not designed to shrink back into the loneliness of being alone. And so we sort of have to ask ourselves a question like, which discomfort would we rather have? Would we rather have the discomfort of this abusive relationship that we're in and the abusive treatment that we experience and that we give to our partner, or would we rather live in the discomfort of making new choices, and but living a better life on the other side of it? And it's just natural human tendency to stick with the discomfort that we know rather than the discomfort that we don't know.
Right.
And so I love the fact that, you know, one of the things that you do so well is you bring people over the bridge and let them, you know, trade out the discomfort that's so harmful to their lives so that they can push the envelope and live a life that's just so much better. Because it's just the truth is that there are amazing relationships to be had in this world. There are relationships in this world that are filled with fun and love and support. And, you know, I truly believe that there's a lid for every pot, and you don't have to settle for, you know, for a relationship that's just there because it is.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love the fact that you bring people over that bridge of fear and help them live that new life, because it's amazing. It's amazing when you see that better is available, and life is too short not to live a better life. You know, I had a guy um, who came to me when he was 72 years old.
Wow.
He was 72 years old, and he was like, you know, I'm ready um, to start dating. And you know, he wasn't the victim of abusive relationships. He was on the autism spectrum. He just didn't know how to do it. But you know, you don't want to hit 72 years old and then have the realization like, oh my God, there's better life out there. I should really start living it. There's just grab the horns now and then enjoy
Yeah.
every day that follows.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point to make because I talk to so many women who shut off the idea of ever getting into a relationship again because they have the belief that it will only create more pain. And they choose to move through life with this giant chip on their shoulder, believing that men only want one thing. All the men that she meets are assholes. Like there's no good men left. It's too hard to meet people at her age. All the good men that like her wind up being married, or they're not available, or they're seeing other people. And there's just this host of excuses around why she can't have it. And sadly, I see a lot of women who've been single for years and years, like 10 years and up. And they get to a point where there's a knowing inside of them that realizes there could be a better way, that there is a better way, but that knowing is what gets them on the phone with me, number one. But it's also up against years of negative belief and conditioning. And oftentimes it's really a battle of, is she going to choose the temporary discomfort of letting go of her limitations and allowing, key word, allowing herself to receive and be seen? Or is she going to choose the long-term comfort that has kept her stuck for so many years? And sadly, I see a lot of people choosing option number one. And it's heartbreaking. And of course, we're not the omniscient controllers of other people's lives. So, you know, it's out of our hands at that point. Um, and you know, I never know what some people's trajectory is in life. And it's kind of the double-edged sword of doing this work. You want to help somebody see the light, but at the same time, you can't drag them over broken glass and drag them over the finish line to do it. But it, you know, it's also, there's also a level of discomfort that I face, and I'm sure maybe you face this as well in some regards of, you know, learning to release or having a sense of non-attachment, if that makes any sense, to wanting it for people. I think if you are wanting to change, you truly have to want it more than your fear, and more than your comfort zone that has cost you emotionally, oftentimes physically, oftentimes financially, um, over the course of your life.
Yeah, and I think that the fear is real. You know, one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is that, you know, the reason why chemistry with another person and compatibility with another person is so amazing is because it's not easy, right? You know,
Right.
there you're a complex person, everyone else is a complex person. Trying to mesh two complex people into one simple relationship is very difficult. And so, you know, it takes time, it takes commitment, to find that person who does have the right chemistry with you, and who isn't, you know, for lack of a better word, a shithead. Yeah, there's shitheads out there. There's
Yeah.
shitty guys out there. Guess what? There's shitty women out there too. There's
Yeah.
shitty people in this world, but there are also a lot of really good ones. And not every one of them is going to be the lid to your pot. But, you know, if you want the payoff of a lifetime of happiness, which is absolutely out there, what it takes is a commitment to ditching what doesn't work, ditching what causes you pain, and getting on that path to, you know, meet the people who might be your ideal partner. And that requires a little bit of a leap of faith. It requires a leap of faith that they're out there. Guess what? They are. But it also requires, you know, a leap of faith that you are capable of being single for the period of time that it takes to go out there and find the one who really is going to make you happy.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, this country has an epidemic of, not just domestic violence, but it has an epidemic of relatively peaceful divorce. And the reason for the divorce is in some respects quite the same. It's that people are happy to go with momentum, even when the momentum is taking them in the wrong direction, because there's a leap of faith that's required to say, no, 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 that's not what I want. There's better out there, but like, I don't want to take the time to go find it. I don't want to take the energy to go find it. I'm afraid of what it takes to go find it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've talked to a lot of people that have stayed for 20, 30 years, way past the point of expiration in a marriage that wasn't serving them, and in many ways was damaging to them. You know, one of the things that my clients often struggle with is they get is the intense chemistry. And one of the most confusing aspects with women who have this pattern is that they oftentimes get into whirlwind, super intense. They've met their soulmate. They've never experienced a connection like it in their life. And 90% of the time, that person winds up being the most abusive person that she's ever experienced. And I can say this from personal experience, but I would say 90% of the people that I talk to have all had this common thread that they fall for very, very strong chemistry. And so I believe one of the things that you said, you know, it takes time. And I do believe that it takes time, past that chemistry. I once heard a teacher, he's actually a yoga teacher, Rod Stryker, but he gave a speech one time and he said if it's really, really, really amazing off the charts chemistry right away, it's a bad sign.
Hmm.
What do you feel about that?
Um, I like chemistry. I love the intense feeling of finding someone who who pleases you and who you please. So for me, I think the problem is not intense chemistry at the beginning. I think it's what happens when that chemistry sort of dissolves,
Yeah.
right? Chemistry is I'm going to nerd out here a little bit on some evolutionary biology, but our bodies and our brains are designed to have an intense chemistry
Yeah.
with another person because that is what allows a couple to stay together long enough to procreate, which is what which is what allows humanity to continue. So chemistry with the right person is going to happen from a chemical perspective because our bodies are sort of designed to release those endorphins and hormones that make us want to stick to another person really really hard, and that that typically happens for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. What you would call the honeymoon period. The
Right.
honeymoon period is really just a fancy way of saying the period of time where our bodies are just like a rush of chemicals that are designed to keep us together, but the body can't keep that up. The
Right.
body can't release those chemicals nonstop with the same person because it's not designed to do that. And so then, in modern society where we live, the question just becomes, well, what do we do now that our body is not rushing with these bonding chemicals? Now that we can see reality for what it is, what do we do now? And reality might be good. Sometimes when those chemicals wear off, what you have is a really amazing relationship where you guys have the same passions and you respect each other and you talk to each other in ways that you want to be talked to, and your love languages are their love languages, and that's fantastic. That's the relationship you want. But it's the relationship where those chemicals wear off and now reality is ugly. That's where you have to make the choice that it's time to exit and try again.
Yeah, and I think that is what so many people struggle with is
So
because
many people.
yeah, so many people struggle with that. And I would even add to that in that many, many women that I talk to, and from a biological standpoint too, women over evolution have developed a heightened intuitive sense just from motherhood and being connected to their offspring and sensing danger, just like a mama tiger senses danger, even if it's nowhere in sight, she has that intuitive sense. And biologically, women have a stronger sense of intuition. And what I find is that even in those super intense chemistry laden crazy couple of months, most women that I speak to, they know something is off right
Okay.
away. Yeah. They don't know what it is, but they can tell that something it doesn't quite add up. And sadly, what I find out is that most people aren't willing to explore that because the payoff of amazing passion far outweighs this niggling little gut feeling that something is off. And most of the time, the dust settles, and they're left with like, oh gosh, this is not good. Like, this is destructive. This is toxic. And because they avoided and did not get uncomfortable to explore, weren't willing to get uncomfortable enough to explore that niggling little gut feeling, um, that pattern continues even once the dust settles and the behavior gets worse and worse and worse. And they're faced with a choice. Um, so I think it takes a lot of awareness and a lot of being willing to get uncomfortable. And what I find in the clients that I work with too is that oftentimes, and this is probably with everybody to a certain extent, but specifically for my clients because they've had past toxic relationships, or they have some kind of childhood dysfunction, they're already living their life from a place of lack. They're
Hmm.
already living their life from a place of, I've got the job, I've got the house, I've got the hobbies, I've got the friends, but there's still this pervasive sense that something's missing. Um, and when she arrives into a new relationship and she's swept off her feet, like that's what people live for. You know, people live to be swept off their feet.
Totally.
Um, but because there's often, with the people that I work with, there's often some self-worth issues, there's some confidence issues. Um, that addiction to that high, that chemical intensity is quite strong. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in toxic relationships, there's trauma bonding, and then there's a behavioral pattern of intermittent reinforcement, which yes, and intermittent reinforcement is extremely powerful on brain chemistry,
It
and
is.
really, yes, and leaves people logically knowing that this person is an asshole, but yet they're so emotionally compelled to try again, to try again, to try again. And I'm sure I know we spoke about this briefly over the weekend, but in your time as a prosecutor, you saw this pattern, but from a different angle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's being a prosecutor is a really interesting and somewhat skewed view on reality, because your reality day in day out from the moment you walk into the office is just humans as criminals and humans as victims, and it's interesting to look back on my years as a prosecutor and how much that skewed my own brain chemistry and how I viewed the world. But yes, one of the things that I did fairly often, is I would work in the early case assessment room where, we would take cases 4, 5, 6 hours after arrest, and we don't get to choose the cases that we pick up. It's just literally, what's the next folder. Um, and too often they were domestic violence cases. And what's really sort of interesting and sad about them is, when you look at the rap sheet for the defendant, and by the way, it's like 99% of the time it's male, right? I can't recall more than a handful of times that the defendant was a female, but it happens. But most of the time it's male, and you look at the rap sheet and it's like, arrest, 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 domestic violence, domestic violence, domestic violence, and 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 I'm not entirely sure that in my early 20s when I started doing this, I think I started at 24, that I was equipped for the reality of what the world looked like. That just wasn't my world. But what I came to notice was this pattern where, the abuser would abuse the victim, the abuser would be arrested, um, and then one of two things would happen. The abused would not come into the early case assessment bureau to proceed with the case, or they would, but after they got the order of protection, a week later, the abuser would violate it, and say I love you, and then the cycle would come again. And
Yeah.
it's not unusual to see this happen 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 times or more. And what's sad was that as I sort of progressed in my career and I started doing, homicide beeper duty, where I would do, a 24-hour cycle of just responding to homicides, you see what the end result can be, right? The cycle of violence doesn't stay on a low hum. It
No.
escalates, the
Oh,
cycle it's really a spiral if you think about it. It
yeah.
starts with a small cycle of little things, but it spirals out. And what's really sort of, can't really think of the right word, but what's so sort of horrible is that it's sort of like a slippery slope, right? It starts with like little verbal things, and then bigger
Yeah.
verbal things, and then light physical violence, and then it's sad, but then you end up at a homicide scene. And, I saw that sort of over and over in my career. And it's really, really tough to see, because you'd like to just take the person in your office who's been the victim of domestic violence and kind of like put your arms around him and be like, there's better out there. You just need to walk away.
Yeah.
Right. And there are complexities. I get it. Right. Some of I was in one of the poorest congressional districts in America, maybe the poorest congressional district in America. A lot of people don't have the money to walk away, or they have kids
Yeah.
together, right? There are
Yeah.
complexities to it. I'm not pretending that life is simple, okay? But what I did just see, though, is a cycle of violence that got progressively worse, and sometimes people lost their lives. And I can appreciate that for so many of these victims who I was meeting, it's hard to see the forest for the trees. It's hard to see that there's better out there. It's hard to
Yeah.
see that there are choices to be made other than try to get your partner to be a better partner. But there are, because in most respects, trying to make your partner a better partner is the hardest option.
Exactly. Exactly. And I agree with that so much. And I think that that behavior doesn't stop necessarily when she leaves. That behavior just carries over. And sadly, a lot of women that I talk to, and even that I've worked with, they have done that. They've gone back 5 times, 7 times, 10 times. They've broken up. They're embarrassed to admit how many times they've broken up and gotten back together when we talk on the phone. And unfortunately, it takes that many times, and at the same time, that much emotional, psychological, and oftentimes physical damage. It has to get to that breaking point. But the saddest part about that is that it creates so much internal damage that it's like, not when she leaves, she's just not all of a sudden better. She moves through her life still carrying that damage, and she's unable to fully let it go. And that's something that we help our clients do. So I think, one of the things that we really touched on quite heavily was the importance of mindset, and being willing to realize that there is a different choice, that there is a different reality, and allowing yourself to receive that choice, allowing yourself to make that choice, and then most importantly, allowing yourself to be temporarily uncomfortable on that path. And the difference between this discomfort is that it's temporary, but it equals long-term gain, whereas the choice of remaining comfortable either in loneliness or in victimhood or in choosing the wrong partner because on some level it's still comfortable or safe, is that produces long-term pain and long-term harm. So really mindset, and this is really something that I preach heavily on with clients that come to work with us, and choosing to be a little bit uncomfortable in that process. Anything that you want to add to that?
I think that one of the things that I learned in my own life is that living a better life is just easier when you have the help of someone who knows what they're doing. Um, I like to consider myself a very intelligent person. I think I'm emotionally intelligent. My wife is also extremely intelligent and a very, very successful doctor. And, even between the two of us, and we're very bright and very connected, when we needed to bridge our own gap, um, we sought the help of professionals, because you can make the choice to live a better life, and we did, but it's just easier when you have someone show you how to do it and give you the tools for how to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think, doing this alone, making the conscious choice alone, um, trying to figure it out alone can be frustrating. And you can have the best intentions in the world to try to fix this by yourself and get on YouTube and read a bunch of books and listen to a bunch of podcasts. But when you don't have someone consistently in your corner, step by step through the process, holding your hand past the bridge of fear every single time you cave and go back into your old self-sabotage, if you don't have someone there week by week, I've seen people take years. I mean, I've talked to so many people that have spent years and years and years, 10 years sometimes, talking to a counselor, rehashing the past, but never having a step-by-step strategy on how to change it, how to make a different future, how to create a different reality. And I think when, we're left to our own devices, especially if you have like 20 or 30 years of poor choices, being a people pleaser, not wanting to make other people feel bad, it's an arduous uphill journey, and it doesn't have to be. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions in healing is that it has to take a long time and that it's got to take forever and like you have to do all this work. And that's simply not true. There is
No.
work.
Yeah.
There's work for sure. But when you have the right professional support, you can get there so much faster.
So much faster. And
Yeah.
my clients are oftentimes like so surprised that I have, my own coaches, right? Because I'm helping these people live their own better lives. And I think that there's this baked in assumption that I have it all together and I have all the answers. And the fact of the matter is, because I am a coach and I know what coaching can do for others, I have my own, network of people who help me get there. And I talk about, about Yair all the time. Yair is my therapist, and he's the guy who he helped me and my wife make more progress towards living the lives that we want in 8-10 weeks than we were able to make together in the 10 prior years. We made the choice to live a better life, but we spent 10 years trying to figure out how to do it ourselves. And, it's not cheap. It's certainly not cheap, but, it was money well invested, because every time I spend time with him or we spend time with him, I make a bigger leap, in 50 minutes or a week than I do in the previous years. Because the fact of the matter is that as human beings, we can want better for ourselves, but we're really, really bad at being objective.
Right.
We cannot take ourselves and move outside of our body and look at ourselves from an objective third-party perspective and make rational decisions based on that. We have a lens through which we view life, and we make our choices through that lens. And the fact of the matter is that if we want to make progress in our life and live a radically better life than the one that we have now, we need to rely on people who know how to live that life and who have the strategy for how to live that life. And so my clients come to me and I help them live a better life, but I have my own people that I rely upon to live, to help me live the life that I want to live. And it just comes from a place of understanding that I could want something for myself, but if I want to have it, I need the fastest route from A to B. And the fastest route from A to B is just working with an expert who knows how to get from A to B.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And I practice what I preach. And, I get the help that I need to get from my A to B, and my clients do the same. And, I love that you are able to get your people from A to B in the fastest possible time that it takes, because everything else is just pulling your hair out.
Totally. Yeah. And I completely agree. And, I definitely, have my own support and my own coaches and my own therapist and get my own help. And I just had someone Friday or Thursday of last week, and she reported that she found the most amazing, healthy relationship, the first one in her entire life. And she'd been struggling for 15 years. And 3 months after working together, she met this person. So it doesn't have to It doesn't, it's the stories that we buy into. And oftentimes we are too caught up in our own stuff to see the forest for the trees. We're too close to it. We're in it. We can't, and it does take an expert to point out kindly in love all of your blind spots and steer you in the right direction. Um, so it really is about making that choice to invest in yourself, making that choice to be uncomfortable in the face of change, being committed, being decisive, and not buying into the story of, well, someday I'll do better. One day. One day I'll do better next time. I know I learned my lessons this time. I'm going to do better next time. There is no next time. All you have is right now in this moment. So if you are feeling that you're tired of buying into the false belief and the false story of someday, if you're ready to take a stand for yourself, if you're ready to not just make the choice, the conscious choice and the decision to change the way that you show up in relationship, to change your pattern, but you actually want to do the work step by step in the fastest way possible and see the most progress that you've ever made in your entire life, even if you spent 10 years in therapy and you still attract the wrong people, then book some time to chat with us right now. Go to bethanydotson.com/apply, and we will get on the phone and we'll get really clear on what's not working for you. We'll help you get even more clear. A lot of times people come on the phone with us and they think they know what their problem is, but it's usually something completely different. So we'll help you get super clear on what's really holding you back. We'll then help you get really clear on the exact steps, super easy, simple steps that won't take you 10 years in therapy rehashing your childhood to achieve, so that you can ultimately break past all of your negative limiting beliefs and the cycle that you've been in your intimate relationships and attract the kind of love that you want. If that's you, if you're professional, if you're single, if you were sick and tired of being sick and tired, go to bethanydotson.com/apply right now and get on our calendar to talk to us about completely changing your life in the shortest amount of time possible. I can't promise you it's going to be super easy. Can't promise you it's going to be a cakewalk. I can promise you it is the simplest path, and you will have support step by step every inch of the way. Jeremy, any parting words?
I'm curious, like, so you do it at no cost, right, to people?
Yeah, so the call is a free assessment. The call is a free breakthrough call.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing. And I look at sort of my own career and I sometimes ask myself, like, I deal with autistic young adults and their families who are just living these like miserably lonely, frustrating lives. And sometimes, I ask myself, like, what is the barrier to people like getting on the phone? Because I also work with people, for free. Like I'll get on the phone with them at no cost, 60 to 90 minutes, and we'll just get an amazing amount of clarity about what they want, why they don't have it, and what they need to do to get it. And sometimes, like, what's the resistance? And I think that for a lot of people, the resistance is that they're also conditioned in some way to believe that if something is no cost, that there's like a string attached, right? Like, what's the catch? And like, one of the things that I really love about you, because we've gotten to know each other, is like that there's no string attached. Like, you're not selling anything to anybody.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is so really amazing about what you do is that people need to ask you to work with you, and you're not trying to sell them on anything, because if people want to live a better life, you can't drag them. They have to
No.
ask you to do it. And so,
Right.
that's something that I've noticed in my own career as well. Like, people just are like, oh, I don't want anyone to sell me anything, right? And
Yeah.
and so, like, I really appreciate that you don't sell people anything. You give of yourself in such amazing ways, including on these Facebook lives. This one, which isn't quite live, but because of technical issues. But you're such a giver of yourself, and I hope like people really take advantage of the opportunity to get the clarity that that you can give them, because there is such a better life on the other side, but you need someone to walk you over that bridge.
Yeah.
You can't do it yourself.
Yeah. And I thank you for that. And I just, I just want to kind of speak to the fear of like, oh, what's the catch? And, we do work with people. We do have work that we do with people. And, if we think that it's a fit on the phone, of course, we'll talk about that and we'll explore the options. But, our job isn't to sell anybody anything. Um, our job is to facilitate clarity and then making the best decisions and taking action on those decisions, whether it's with us or whether it's with someone else. And just specifically for the work that we do, because we're dealing with trauma, it's not necessarily right for everybody. The therapeutic relationship, you need to have a certain level of, you need to have a lot of rapport, you need to have a level of trust, you need to have a certain connection. And that's just not present with everybody that we talk to. And that's okay too. And in those cases, we always refer people to the right support, the right next step so they can get unstuck and start making healthier choices. But it's been proven scientifically in research that if you don't have that like spark, if you don't have that connection with the person that you're working with, whether that's a therapist or a coach or a mentor, you're probably not going to get stellar results, because there's going to be that barrier there. So, our job definitely isn't to sell anybody. Our job is to help people make as much change as possible, help them realize what's possible, help them achieve what they believe is impossible, and do it in the shortest amount of time possible so that they don't waste more time, more precious time of their life that they're not going to get back, more time that they're not even really guaranteed to do that. So, yeah, thank
Thanks
you.
so much for having me. It was a total
Yeah,
honor to be on the phone with you. You do such good work for so many people, and you bring light to so many lives, and it's really awesome to be able to do this with you.
thank you, Jeremy. I truly appreciate you hopping on today. And thank you. If you join this video, hop on and leave a comment or hashtag replay. Let us know what you thought. And I will drop the link to book some time to chat with us also. And we will see you later on this week. Have a good one.